Let's see what happens when we mix the chemistry of three simple old stories together. The first is that story about the Buddha who was on a pilgrimage with his disciple Ananda, and as they were walking down the road, a man was coming the other way and accosted them and said, "Now, I don't believe in God, but I have a feeling that there is some power about you." And the Buddha looked him in the eye and responded, "Why, you foolish man, of course there's a God. There's nothing else but God." And the man was quite shattered and staggered off down the road. And then further on, another man came along. But this man, seeing the Buddha, almost fell down on his knees and said, "Surely you are God incarnate. I see your light. God is great." And the Buddha responded by saying, "Why, you stupid man, there's no such thing as God." And the poor man was quite shattered and staggered off down the road. And further on, they met another man coming the other way. And this man also accosted them and said, Now, I see that there's a great light around you, but I'm an agnostic, and I don't know whether there's a God or not. What do you think?" And the Buddha looked him straight in the eye, ignored the question, brushed him aside and walked on. And the man walked down the road quite shattered. Now when they came to their place of rest, Ananda, after he'd prepared their cups of tea and they'd settled for the evening, said to the Buddha, "Master, I'm very troubled. Today, first of all, you said that there was only God, then that you said that there was no God, and then you remained silent." And the Buddha said, "The answers that were given were for those who asked the questions. But if my answers have troubled you, then that is your question." The second simple story is that story about the great scholar, great Pandit. He was a philosopher and he taught comparative religion. He loved to debate. But finally his time arrived and he died and found himself in heaven at the pearly gates. Now, St. Peter was there to greet him, but when the great philosopher met him, the philosopher said, now, I have no belief systems at all. All of my life I've debated whether you exist or not, and I'm ready to discuss with you whether in fact you do." Well, with that, St. Peter gave out a great sigh and reached into his cloak and brought out a whistle and blew one long note. And out of the pearly gates came two burly angels, muscles rippling under their feathery wings. And St. Peter said, "Take him in, he belongs to us." Then the final story is about that time when in a town where a certain magician lived, a priest came into town, and of course in their meeting in the coffee shop the priest was expounding his litany and so forth, and the magician was a little bit peeved off about this because the priest just wouldn't listen to what the magician had to say because he had his take on it, didn't he? So after after a while, when the argument was getting quite heated, the magician thought he'd had enough of this, and it so happened that he had over his shoulder a black bag. So he said to the priest, well, you obviously are not listening to what I have to say. Would you mind if I put you in my bag? And the priest stood up to his full height and said, well, you could try, but of course you're a sinner, and I'm the only one who can save you. But in the blink of an eye, in went the priest into the magician's black bag. Well, this kind of set the magician on a mission. You know, he thought that these priests and these monks who didn't listen to people really should be disposed of. So he went around popping them all into his black bag. And of course, when he was doing that, he decided that, you know, there was so much evil in the world that he would be able to eradicate that too. So everything that came along that he disagreed with, he'd just pop in his little black bag, wouldn't he? But then his time arrived also. Life comes to an end, and the magician found himself down at the gates of hell. And he said, well, what am I doing here? And those demons at the gate said, well, you saw so much evil in the world that you really have an affinity with us, you belong here. And the magician didn't like the look of that at all. So he just popped hell into his black bag. So of course he didn't have anywhere else to go. So he had to go up to heaven, didn't he? So he's outside the pearly gates, and the magician says, well, you have to let me in. And you know, St. Peter at the gate said, well, why should we let you in? And the magician said, well, there's no hell anymore, so there's nowhere else to go. And while St. Peter was cogitating about it, the magician said, well, since there's no place else to go, and if you don't let me in, I'll just pop you into my black bag. So when we mix the chemistry of these three very simple stories together, what does it bring up for us in a recognition of where we find ourselves now, in a world of beliefs and religions and persuasions and all of that? Where do we rest now? Do we have such a thing as a black bag that we can pop everything in that we don't agree with? What do you think? What are the chemistry of these simple stories?
Well, one that we're certainly not going around questioning whether it's this or that or that or that anymore.
Right.
And if you popped everything into the black bag, that means that really it doesn't really matter.
Right.
What other people think or what they're doing,
Right.
you know?
So is the question, what does this black bag represent for us? What is this thing about presence and being in the here and now with no opinions and really no desires to speak of, no judgment about this being good and that being bad, etc., etc.?
Choice.
Choice?
Choice.
In the moment, a choice?
Well, just because it's gone into the black bag doesn't mean it's disappeared. It's still there. It's just in your subconscious now, I guess, or it's there working away somewhere. It doesn't just disappear.
Really? What about every reality that comes for us?
I
What do we
see
do?
all the illusion.
Yes,
It's all illusion.
right on.
It's not real. And the black bag is probably the symbolizing being black, the emptiness that we just pop it in there because it's not real.
It disappears. Right.
Ah,
So what does this black bag represent for us in terms of what we know as this presence where there's no judgment?
Acceptance, maybe?
Uh-huh. What's our experience of it in the moment?
Well, it disappears.
Right.
Whatever is happening, like we're there, but then we don't carry it away for it, it just disappears.
Right. When the next reality comes along, that's a new reality, and
Yeah.
that disappears along with the rest.
Mm.
So for Christmas we all get a black bag.
You got your black bag.
Yeah. But we don't get caught in like really, look what he did. Whenever it come up and he thought, oh, that's not in the bag. Just kept going.
Yes.
He didn't debate whether, oh, should I, shouldn't I.
No,
He's
no.
way past that.
Yes.
So the black bag is mine, isn't it?
Right. Is it?
If it was a mine, then it would stay there, wouldn't it? Whatever you put into the black bag, it would stay there if it was your mind.
Yes, it would.
But it doesn't.
No,
He doesn't think about it again.
no.
I love that.